So I think we need to be much faster with legislation and in order to put pressure on to the supply chains. Because when there is a clear direction from our governments that we will go this direction, then and have numbers behind it. So you need to have, I don't know, 10% for all imports into EU and US and other markets of recycled content, and it cannot be polyesters, and we can come back to that. And the brands, they also need to step up, but so far the brands basically talk on a corporate level what they're going to do, but when it comes down to, let's say, the bolts and screws, it always comes back like, do you have enough capacity? Is the price higher or lower, and so forth? And it's enough with 1% higher price, and they go all shaky.
Nevertheless, it's 200 labels. Usually legislation is not simple. And I just fear that Tesla of the fashion industry might be hindered because of all of the administrative regulatory processes that they would have to go through.
Absolutely, and protecting status quo is what normally happens in these lobbying processes, rather than protecting the environment and the future. Also, traditional cotton all of a sudden ends up as organic cotton and BCI. I think there is more. I heard someone saying there's more organic cotton being sold than produced.
How is that possible?
Yeah, no, exactly. How is that possible? So if you would buy then a polyester shirt, and it says, this polyester shirt has 10% recycled in it, then it should not be recycled polyester bottles. It should be recycled polyester from textiles. So recycling is about textile to textile recycling.
Hello, Patrik. Welcome to Behind the Seams.
Thank you very much.
Cool. So, I look very much forward to talk to you about sustainability in the fashion industry. But if you don't mind, let me do a quick intro of you. So, as far as I understand, you have many years of leadership at executive level, experience of that, and from various different industries. And you most recently joined Renewcell in 2019 as the chairman of the board. And then you took over as the CEO, I think up until October last year, right? 2023.
Yep.
And Renewcell's promise, correct me if I'm wrong, was to make fashion sustainable or maybe circular, but on an industrial scale by recycling worn out clothes. Anything you would like to add to that brief description?
No, I started off as chairman on the board. I think I already started in 2018, but doesn't matter. Yes, the promise that we actually wanted to do was to use scrap textiles, both post-consumer waste, but also industrial waste that otherwise would be incinerated, and use that material and then recycle it over and over again. So that was the promise. And the industry currently doesn't have any recycled materials available except for cotton, that would be. But other than that, and cotton is actually being broken down, but we can come back to that. But that was the promise, and we really tried to make that happen.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to cover the technology and the business of Renewcell, but also generally your thoughts about the industry and then what is sustainable and not. But just for the sake of the audience, not everyone is very mature in their understanding of the sustainable environmental impacts of the fashion industry. How about helping them setting the stage and the scene, maybe painting a picture of how much impact the textile industry is actually having on the environment? Because I could assume you have a better grasp on the scale of the impact than most others. So how about quantifying the current global challenges that we're facing?
Well, if you look at the fashion industry, it's one of the most contributing to the CO2 problems that we have, and also quite contaminating where it is operating. The fashion industry emits approximately 5 to 8% of the world's CO2 emissions. Polyester clothing is causing approximately 35% of all the microplastics in the seas. And cotton is using enormous resources, both when it comes to water, pesticides, and fertilizers. And every year, about 200 million trees are being cleared in order to make textile fibers. And only less than 1% of those clothes are recycled back into new clothes. So yeah, it's a huge issue. The majority of the textiles are going into incineration or being put on landfill. So I mean, if you look at it in a general term, what I believe in, and I think also what Renewcell believes in, is that we need to use what we once produced, and that is recycling. We need to start doing that also on a product levels, and that's the textile industry has to move to that direction too.
Yeah, I mean, it's really incredible, and not necessarily in a good sense. It's so hard to grasp what you just said in terms of the scale of it all. I've also done like a brief research before this, and I mean, I've been working within the industry for quite some years now, but you're really not aware of it, especially as a consumer. I don't think that you grasp these things. I read somewhere, correct me if I'm wrong here, but 100 billion garments was produced or is produced every year for in the fashion industry, and it was, I think I read somewhere as well that it doubled between 2000 and 2015, and it's supposed to be, it's almost going to double again until 2030. I mean, it's just such huge scales, and as you said, like only a fraction is really reused. So the question is, what happens to the other parts, right? Like landfills, where I believe EU stated somewhere that the European Union stated that like most of this textile is shipped to Africa or Asia, which is then just filled on land or wasted somewhere. But I mean, before digging deep into how to address this, just out of curiosity, how have you personally been changing the ways you shop, or how do you think about it on a personal level?
Well, I buy Renewcell textiles when I can, but it's very little available. So I have a pair of Levi's jeans, for example, with 40% Circulose fibers in them. But also, I really try to stay away from polyesters because that's the big problem. But also cotton, and if you have to buy cotton, then try to buy BCI organic cotton. However, those are not good, but somewhat better.
Mm,
And also the other thing I think is important is not to fall for let's say the marketing or greenwashing, if you will, from brands. Normally you get, if you go out to a store today, it's just green tags everywhere, and recyclable, or and so forth and so on, and
yeah,
you have to be very careful with those claims, I would say.
yeah.
The other thing we do a lot is actually buying secondhand.
Mm,
Both me and my daughters and my wife, we are all keen on that. So that is quite good. But in the end, we need also to have new clothes produced
yeah.
from uh, sustainable sources and recycled sources. We cannot just keep on digging out from the earth's crust over and over again and just burning it and putting it down to CO2 in the end. It's not. We don't have enough planets to do that.
I mean, it of course begs the question how to then make this, as I said in the beginning, on an industrial scale, right? Like not everyone be able to, or it will not help if the only solution is to buy second hand, for example. I mean, it's just not going to work. So in order to achieve industrial scale of recycling and truly environmentally feasible solutions. I mean, you told me off camera that you don't believe that the free market on its own anymore. I think at least you've been shifting your opinion, it sounded like. Will be able to drive the changes needed to implement true sustainable initiatives. It would be amazing if you could expand on this realization, like why do you believe this, and what would we do about this? What kind of regulations, legislations are you looking for?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, if you look at what have happened in other industries and why they became more sustainable, let's take the car industry for example. In California, they were making a lot of passing a lot of laws around combustion cars and in order to promote electrical vehicles. I think they started already back in 2000, 2005, and so forth. And they're very, very clear about that we are phasing out the combustion fueled cars. That made it possible for a company like Tesla to be founded back then, and also starting building those electrical vehicles. And the public knew, okay, I better buy an electrical vehicle. We have a problem with CO2 and so forth. If you take other industries like the solar industry, you take there have been a lot of subsidies, there have been a lot of support also for windmills, etc., and so on. But the fashion industry doesn't have those regulations just yet. We see that EU is starting to put up those regulations, and they will start coming in by 2025. There is this collection, and then there is the Green Deal and the textile initiatives that EU has with minimum recycled content, extended producer responsibility, prevent microplastics, incentives to circular business models, and so forth. That will come between 2025 and 2028, 30, or so forth. However, we are we're very close to already now the 1.5 degree
Mm,
in the world. So I think we need to be much faster with legislation and with in order to put pressure on to the supply chains, because when there is a clear direction from our governments that we will go this direction, then and have numbers behind it. So you need to have, I don't know, 10% for all imports into EU and US and other markets of recycled content, and it cannot be polyesters, and we can come back to that.
mm,
Uh, we or actually they're saying, well, you're going to get an extra tax if you actually do this. But it
mm,
needs to be super clear, and they need to be simple, these rules, so everybody knows, okay, this is what I need to do.
mm,
Because if we don't, then the industry is of course in a competitive situation, and the ones that are trying, they are getting slammed with lower prices for the ones that are not trying.
mm,
So I mean, it's a catch 22, and the brands they also need to step up. But so far, the brands basically talk on a corporate level what they're going to do.
mm,
But when it comes down to, let's say, the bolts and screws, it always comes back like, oh, do you have enough capacity? Do you have, is the price higher or lower, and so forth? And it's enough with 1% higher price, and they go all shaky. And it's super difficult because the connection between the corporate level and, let's say, the operational level in most brands is not there. They talk about it on the communication and on corporate level, but what they do is falling back into old tracks.
yeah,
Is our experience or my experience. So I think there need to be a lot more, let's say, incentives and drive. I think the industry wants to go circular, but we need to ensure that it goes fast enough, because otherwise companies like Renewcell and Circ and others out there, how would we be able to invest when the brands are not committing to offtake agreements? And that's the other point that I'd like to make. In order to change an industry, like for example the battery industry,
Mm.
There's a lot of investments going into batteries. There's also a lot of investments going into other energy sources, but they're all fueled by offtake agreements. And here, the I think the brands need to uh, start giving offtake agreements of substantial levels in order to give the confidence to new companies coming in that yeah, there will be a market once we're operational. And that is, I think that is what have happened to Renewcell. You know, the brands did not do the commitments they were supposed to do and fast enough.
Okay. But if we look at the car industry and compare it to uh, the fashion industry and the commitments that is happening, my feeling is that in the beginning it was really Tesla driving that discussion, and I mean, I remember there was some other executives from car companies that kind of just dismissed the whole thing as not feasible. Um, of course, now it sounds different, but as you said, like batteries are being subsidized. We have in Sweden Northvolt that is being heavily subsidized and supported by the government. Um, but in the beginning, it feels like um, there wasn't like a very clear direction or agenda on how to do it. Obviously, California had some idea or a goal, but it was really like uh, I don't think it was necessarily a commitment by the car manufacturers that drove this change initially. It kind of became like a disruptive thing from below with Tesla
Mm.
um, that kind of forced the top managers at car companies to make these changes. Do you see any way? And I guess I would assume to some extent Elon Musk and the consumers, the free market, had some say in this. Do you believe that there is? I mean, do you believe my? Do you agree with my claim? And also, do you think that there is any way to speed up that process by making the customers, consumers, more pushing for it in any way?
Mm. First, I fully agree with what you're saying, but I think that Tesla had some tailwind because of the Californian legislation, and it could kind of get off the tracks or get off, you know, the starting blocks
Mm,
by that, and then the industry, or they were actually the pioneers, and I fully agree. You know, the big car companies of the world, they were saying that this can't be done and so forth and so on, and now everybody's working on electrical cars. So I do believe that we also need to have trailblazers when it comes to the brands, saying, you know, that yes, this is something that we want to do,
mm,
and we will market it, and we will show that we are actually doing more than just the current legislation,
mm,
and taking that leadership of sustainability, that is up for grabs. And I believe also that there is two huge benefits for the brand that actually take that leader role.
yeah.
One is, of course, on the corporate level. You will be able to show to your investors, to your banks, to your constituents, to your employees, that we are doing more than legislation, because legislation is currently a little bit behind. Um, the other thing is the brand loyalty. If you start pushing that and explaining that to your customers, that hey, I'm actually doing more than I'm supposed to,
Mm,
you get a brand equity increase, of course, and also that the customers will start saying, going into an H&M store and an Inditex store, or saying, I'm feel proud of buying from this brand because they are actually trying to do a little bit more. I'm willing to pay a little bit extra. And if you look at, for example, the Renewcell technology, it would add on approximately 1% on the price of the garment. So it's not a price driven thing. It is about adopting and replacing, viscose. Of course, you can replace 100% because it is a viscose in the end. You can replace about 30% of the cotton. Renewcell have made over 300 styles
mm,
and sold that have been sold in the industrial value chain. And
That's actually very incredible that you did manage to go production. And I know you had customers like you mentioned H&M, Zara, PVH, the group that owns basically Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger and so on,
mm,
and some other brands as well. I assume you've been in negotiation or in dialogue with a lot of brands. Do you see today any brand that would be willing to take that trail, blazing role of driving these change and creating this branding around uh, the way Tesla is done? Basically, is there anyone dedicated, ready to do that?
no, I don't see that. Um,
That's
Unfortunately,
unfortunate. Yeah, it's
yeah,
very
I don't
unfortunate.
see that. I see that they want to do a little bit to so they can actually communicate, but taking that trailblazing and saying I'm going to change, all my cotton or all my cotton garments going to have 30% circulose fiber in them.
Mm,
I don't see that,
no.
and I think. I think there is the problem there is probably that okay, what about the other textiles then or so?
Mm,
But I mean, there will be one brand that actually do this, and that will
mm,
be the winner. It will be one or two, maybe three, but they will be the one earning all those brand equities.
yeah. You know what this reminds me about is when the iPhone removed the keyboard and Tesla removed all of the buttons of the car and just replaced it with a touchscreen. It's like, and in both of the cases, obviously Apple was a big company when that happened, but nevertheless, the product was really in a small uh, special category of smartphones, right? Like that market did not really exist that much. Do you believe that this drive, if it happens, obviously it has to happen at some point, will have to be driven by brands? Will it be by a big brand or a smaller challenger that will make this happen?
I think it will be a smaller challenger, actually. Yeah. The big ones have they're two. I hope it would be the one of the big ones, and they have actually moved quite a lot. If you look at H&M and Inditex, they have made a lot of commitments. They have pushed it a lot. H&M have made a lot of investments into companies like Renewcell.
Mm,
Um, but in the end, I mean, they are so big organizations, so the inertia might be the thing that actually slows them down. So you probably need to have somebody that's a little more uh, flexible and
nimble. Yeah.
fast, nibble. Yeah, exactly. That actually will take on this. That is what I. That's what I see and believe.
Great. I mean, of course, one hopes that the free market will find the way, because I also fear that if it comes down to regulations and legislation, there's of course this horrible uh, possibility that, well, I won't name any brand names, but the bigger ones that have the ability to lobby, that they will interfere with, let's say, the legislators and push certain things that kind of will, be, I think, what they call regulatory capture, and then limit the ability of really innovative solution. And because you mentioned in the beginning, like greenwashing and other ways of making it look like sustainable. So how do you perceive that risk? And also, maybe if you can talk a little bit more about the misconceptions, the misleading of consumers. I think you mentioned, like, we will get back to polyester and organic cotton and so on. Like, what are the risks with the regulatory capture and pushing legislation, as well as um, greenwashing?
Hmm. The risk with legislation is as far as I can see two. One is it's become too complex that nobody understands and there's always ins and outs and so forth. I believe that this type of legislation should be very clear cut.
Mm,
You need to have 10% 2025 of recycled textiles, period. Or you will get a certain fine or whatever,
mm,
that will be the legislation. 2026, it needs to be 20%, 30%, and so forth and so on. that kind of statements would be extremely powerful, and all the brands would kind of have to do it. And if a big market like Europe would say that, then yeah, it will happen.
Mm.
Um, so I think it needs to be simple.
But do you
The
think that the likelihood of it being simple is high when it comes to European Union legislators? Because right now, I mean, right now, I think there's like 200 sustainable labels, and like just a big portion of them are just misleading, as far as I understand what I've been able to read. So like eco-friendly, good for the environment, and so on. They will actually be banned according to European law, as I read. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, it's 200 labels. Usually, legislation is not simple, and I just fear that that Tesla of the fashion industry might be like hindered because of all of the administrative regulatory processes that they would have to go through.
Yeah, that's also a risk. Absolutely, absolutely, and protecting status quo is what normally happens in these lobbying processes, rather than protecting the environment and the future. But if we then come to the next question, because it interlinks with this, I mean, if you look at the current materials available, one of the biggest fibers today is polyesters.
Mm.
And when people are talking about recycled polyesters, it doesn't exist in my mind. I mean, recycled polyesters is taking PET bottles those PET bottles can be recycled over and over again. And
As
what,
bottles again, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. So those bottles can be recycled over and over. But when you take those bottles and make them into a fleece jacket, then all of a sudden you can't recycle it again because it's colored, and it also often contains different type of polymers. So then you need to break it down into monomers or oligomers, and then you need to purify it and then recombine it again, so polymerize it again, which means very high purities in order to do that.
mm,
So polyesters, today there are companies out there like Circ and Ambercycle and others that are working on these solutions of actually using textile to textile polyester recycling. With
mm,
that, I would agree. I would say, yeah, this is good solutions. If you then take the next big category of fibers, that would be cotton.
mm,
Then you have normal cotton, which is coming from, I don't know, from all different kind of areas in the world, and you have slave laborers and have whatnot. And then the other one is a BCI, Better Cotton Initiatives, and then you have organic cotton. All those three are using a lot of water, a lot of pesticides, and a lot of fertilizers. So, uh, BCI and organic is somewhat better than, let's say, traditional cotton, but it's not good.
mm.
Look at the Aral Sea. I mean, it's gone. And you have a lot of environmental problems and environmental pollutions because of the pesticides and the fertilizers. So when we are out there looking, especially in the Western world, we're looking after, yeah, cotton. Cotton is a good material. Organic cotton, it sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
But if,
that's what they tell us, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, organic
that
cotton
is
to me is about less toxic chemicals. It's better for soil. It's not allergenic. You know, you don't get
allergen. Yeah,
allergy.
but that would be the pesticides again that is causing
Okay,
these
but you're
allergies.
saying that's not necessarily completely true.
Yeah, correct. I mean, it actually uses fertilizers and pesticides, still using a lot of water. So that's one thing. The other thing is that when you talk to cotton traders, they basically say organic cotton and BCI, it's very difficult to follow that value chain. It's being
Hmm.
mixed in and everywhere, and all of a sudden, also traditional cotton all of a sudden ends up as organic cotton and BCI. I think there is more. I heard someone saying there's more organic cotton being sold than produced.
How how is that
Correct.
possible?
Yeah, no, exactly. How's that possible? So so we're talking about what I'm trying to say here is that what we need to do is to stay true, because what
Mm,
in the end what we're trying to do is to save the planet. And when we then saying, yeah, we'll do it a little bit like this and so forth, and we greenwash it a little bit.
mm,
What I'm trying to the point I'm trying to make is the brands, they should take a step forward and say, no, I will do what's right,
mm,
and I will actually change my composition in my fiber mix.
yeah.
Because today they're saying, well, it's difficult to do this because of, and it's profit over planet
Mm.
in many cases.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I think is a challenge for us consumers because I guess what and we'll go into the renew cell technology a bit, but that literally reuses the cellulosa of the cotton that was once the jeans and so on, right? And then repurposes it in a very, very good way without spilling out, like in the case with polyester or uh, microplastics into the oceans and stuff like that. That really is a sustainable and a recyclable thing. And I'd also say like the source is a very large source that old worn out clothes. So you
Mm.
can really recycle it. But as a consumer, until I met discussed this with you a little bit on the phone and right now, my impression was that there's been a lot of progress already made by the brands, and so I'm just wondering, like, is there any way for one of the brands or maybe the technology providers like the Renewcell to change the perception of actually what is and what is not sustainable, like what you're saying right now with organic and polyester, especially recycling polyester, which I believe is used in a lot of training exercise clothing from, I won't mention any names because most brands probably already use these things, but you're claiming they're not environmentally feasible or sustainable. Why aren't we aware of it as consumers?
Yeah, why aren't we aware? I mean, I think I think it's a complex issue. That and also if you look at textiles today, they're being mixed with all different kind of fibers. So you could have polyester fibers together with cotton, together with viscose, and so forth and so on. So that is, of course, making it difficult.
Mm,
Um, the other one is that I think we should have some kind of a label on textiles saying this amount of this textile was actually recycled. And again, I'm in favor of easy, clear, uh, let's say, messages. So if you would buy then a polyester shirt, and it says, yeah, this polyester shirt has 10% recycled in
mm,
it, then it should not be recycled polyester bottles. It should be recycled polyester from textiles. So
yeah,
recycling is about textile to textile recycling.
yeah, yeah. You
Also,
forget that very easily because
yeah,
it says, and it sounds so good when it says like this T-shirt was made out of 5 bottles.
yeah,
Like, oh, amazing.
yeah. But the problem with that is that you're taking out polyester bottles out of system that is circular,
Mm.
and then you need to pump in oil into that system in order to have the amount that you need.
It's a very interesting situation. I'm just amazed about how we ended up here. But maybe jumping into Renewcell, like I don't know, maybe you can also give a little bit short background, like why did it end up being founded and when and where and who and so on. But more specifically, I'm super interested about the technology, about this Circulose uh, fiber that you were producing. Yeah, just tell me a little bit about that.
That was founded back in 2012 by two professors at the Royal Institute of Technology, Michael Lindström and Gunnar Henriksson, who came up with a technology on how to actually separate the cotton fibers. Viscose is normally produced from wood, So you're chopping down your wood, and then you're making wood chips, and then you're making dissolving pulp, and then you make viscose out of that. What the technology and what Renewcell is doing, what the professors here developed, was a technology on how to separate textiles and into a dissolving pulp, and use that dissolving pulp to make new clothes, and that can be recycled over and over again. Not endlessly, I guess, but it's at least as paper, where
Mm.
7, 8 times, or maybe more. So from that innovation, the company was started, and we built first a pilot plant in Kristinehamn. That didn't work at all from the beginning, but then we changed a lot of machineries and so forth, and in the end we had 90%. No, this is Ortviken here on this one, but the smaller one, we had we produced approximately 1,000 tons a year there. But we were able to produce 90% was within specification, and customers liked it. And then we decided then to build a big plant in Ortviken,
Mm.
and and that's the plant that you had there on the photo.
Yep.
And that plant has a capacity of 60,000 tons initially. Yeah, this is what it looks like inside. This is the cutter. It's you see the dryer on the left hand side, and then it coming into the on the right hand side you see the cutter. So this plant, we raised capital via an IPO, and we built it we were supposed to build it in 12 months. We built it in 18 months, and we started it up in 3 months. So it was super fast. So we have a big warehouse where we take in bales of used textiles and feed the machine here. It's actually a very big plant. You have a bicycle inside of this one,
Mm.
in order to get from one side to the other. And so we shipped our first deliveries to customers end 2022, and then during spring 2023 we ramped up production from a few tons per month up to 3,200 metric tons in May, June, and selling that throughout the value chain. And we have customers like Sanyo, Tangshan, Birla, Yibin, Yilin, and so forth. And they're happy with the product. It works, and they are
Mm.
very. So they have produced. We have also built up the Circulose supplier network, which has the value chain from the viscose fiber producer, so the spinners, the weavers, and we have selected the weavers and the spinners that are used by the biggest brands in the world. So right now it's all available. So all the brands need to do is just to go and tell these weavers, and I want this textile, but I want it with 30% or 50% Circulose fibers in there.
Okay.
So it's all there.
Okay. So literally, what happens is that, as you can see in this image, in one end of the machine goes in like worn clothes. They're being um, cut into pieces. Eventually, a pulp is made, and then that is somehow ending up as this sheet of what looks like almost a garment, like
No. It's
no,
the sheets is so we produce the dissolving pulp. Or
yeah,
Renewcell produce the dissolving pulp. That is the product that Renewcell sells. So dissolving pulp is then sold to viscose manufacturers who
Mm.
dissolve it and make viscose fiber from it. So
Okay.
those companies that do that is like Birla, Sanyo, Tangshan, Yilin, Yibin, and so forth.
Okay, so those are actually the customers of yours, but in order for them to order this product, the brands need to request that specific yeah product, right? Like
Yeah.
it
So yeah. So so then it from them. Let's say the viscose producers. There's the next step is the spinners spinning the yarn, and then you have the weavers making the textiles, and then you have the brands.
okay.
So what the brands need to do, all they need to do now is just to go to their favorite textile manufacturers and say, I want, I don't know how many yards, but 1,000 yards of these products. And
Yeah.
they should go for the big hitters, of course, So for a denim producer, they would say, Levi's, I need this type of denim. And they, of course, they have already collaborations with all their players or all their suppliers, who then are included in this supplier network.
And you said before that this material would increase their current cost with 1%, or maybe the price you said would be increased with 1%.
The,
Um,
yeah, the price would be increased by 1%.
the
So
price would
that
be
means,
increased. Yeah.
yeah. So that means if you take a garment for about, actually a bit less than 1%, but let's say 1%. If you take an average garment in the world has a price of about $25, and
Per.
no, it's just an average. If you take a pair of jeans, it's about
Okay, got
20.
it.
Yeah. To take a pair of jeans, it's actually less than 1%. But let's say on average, so you have $25. So you increase the cost of the fiber would increase at about 25 dollar cents.
And
So
this is to me a little bit shocking, I would probably say, because um, if they don't have to do anything else than just picking that product, barely noticeable price at the end, I can't even imagine that this would be a competitive disadvantage at this point, because it won't really hurt their margins that much. Um, and you guys had investors like H&M. You were publicly listed, as you said, after an IPO for a couple of years. Then the question would be, why? I mean, why did it fail? Because you filed, not you, but Renewcell filed for bankruptcy 2 weeks ago. And the
mm.
question is, of course, why? Is it a challenge in ramping up the production? But you said you were already ramping up production. Um, and why are they not just choosing this material that obviously seems to be much better? What was the problem?
Yeah, that's the question actually. The market, the market was too slow. I mean, we have Renewcell, and when I was there, we were marketing crazily, and we also had a lot of customer visits. We had round tables, we had discussions, we had fair appearances, we had a lot of. I was speaking about it, and the chief commercial officer Trisha was working on it a lot, and we built up this whole supplier network and so forth and so on. But in the end, I think the commitment from the brands that's saying to the garment manufacturers or to the textile manufacturers, this is what we want, didn't come through. And
Even with H&M being your like largest shareholder, they were not able to push for that
no,
either.
they came through with some volumes, but not enough. Others were coming
Did
through
you
with,
have sorry, did you have enough volumes, just to make sure? If they would
yeah,
have
yeah,
come through, you
yeah,
had
yeah,
the capacity. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The capacity is there. And I mean, it's about just building up the capacity.
Mm.
Not the capacity is there. The value chain is there. The prices are there. Um, but I think it was from the brand side. I think they didn't realize they have a difficulty getting it through their systems.
Mm.
I mean, when you talk to developers and you talk to the sustainability people, you talk to the leadership of these brands and so forth, they all say, yes, this is what we need. We're going to go and we're going to make this happen. But when it comes then to converting those commitments into orders, or that those statements into
Mm.
commitment and orders, that's where it fails. It doesn't come through fast enough. And
Yeah.
you can take any brand, and I don't want to single out anyone because I think it's an industry issue, and say, well, why didn't you order this? And they will say, well, we try and we work on it,
Mm.
but it was too slow in the end for Renewcell's shareholders
Yeah.
to work on
To
that.
do you think that if I mean, we don't know what will happen to the to Renewcell? Maybe someone will buy it and continue, but do you think that it's a more of a timing market? I mean, it's a timing issue here. Like, if given 2-3 more years, legislation or no legislation, it would have worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a timing issue. I mean, the technology is there, the demand is there, but it needs to come through in true orders.
So maybe a last topic here. What do you think, having been in the sustainability industry now from a supplier point of view, do you see any other technologies? Do you have, uh, I mean, what can we have as, hopes for the future? Is going to work out? Do you see any exciting things being worked on?
Yeah, I think there's two areas. One is, of course, the polyester area. If you can crack that one, and there are people out there playing, and who's getting close to that technology, I think that would be very interesting.
But what does it mean to crack that one? Is it to produce and recycle it in a sustainable way, or what does it mean?
It means that you need to have a technology that is breaking down the polyester chains and actually decoloring it, and then polymerizing it again, purifying it, polymerizing it again.
Okay.
And that's pretty tough to do that. But there are technologies out there that are working on it. I know at least 3 different type of companies doing that. And so that's one area I think is super interesting. Um, the other one is actually the coloring
Mm.
of materials. That should come through. I think there's a lot of good technologies there happening.
What's the problem with coloring?
Now, coloring is quite there's a lot of poisons and so forth in
Mm.
coloring, and you need to find different type of coloring technologies to to solve those problems. The other one is, of course, leather, and sustainable leather. And here you have museal technologies, mushroom type of technologies, orange peels, and those kind of things. So things are moving in that direction as well. And the last one I think we also need to look at is, to that we make the clothes ready for recycling.
Mm.
So not mixing so many different type of fibers. If you have a
Mm.
polyester or acrylate material, then let it stay there. Don't mix in so many things. And here there is a lot of technology that needs to be developed on the weaving and the spinning side. Today we're mixing in, let's say, elastane into a fabric just to get it elastic, but that can also be done in the weaving and in the way you form you're spinning the threads. So here there are technologies and there are opportunities of getting the same properties,
Mm.
but here I think also when you look at designers today, they are looking at the color and the material, how it drapes. But I think they also need to have a deeper understanding of the environmental impact of what all different materials does, but also how to that they can actually force and help their their suppliers with, no, change it a bit like this in the weaving and so forth, and you'll get to this type of product. So that
Mm,
there is more of a collaboration there.
yeah. And the reason why you don't want to mix it up too much, especially in the early part, so to say, is it's harder to break it apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the more different type of materials you have in there, the more you need to purify it, and the more difficult it is to recycle.
So basically, to end this one with, you sound hopeful for the future of sustainability efforts in fashion. Am I hearing correctly?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I mean, in the end, if we look at 2035,
Mm,
2040, it will have happened.
yeah.
But the question is, how fast can we make it happen, and how to support these young, innovative companies that actually comes in there?
Yeah.
Because if the big brands doesn't support with offtake agreements, they will not get the investments, they will not survive, and then of course the industry is shooting itself in the foot. So it's
Mm,
super important to actually place those offtake agreements from the brand side.
yeah. But I think that's a nice ending as a call out to the big brands to support these initiatives more with offtake agreements, right?
Hmm. Yep.
Thank you so much for joining the behind the scenes.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon again, I hope.
And you. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.